Hello, my name is Dr. Jonathan Hill, and today I'm going to be walking you through the process of finding adjacent THEMIS color viz images with a program that we call JMARS. So first, just a refresher. So the THEMIS camera, which is orbiting Mars, can take both infrared and visible images. And the image on the right here is an example of a color viz image. Um, This is taken in red, green, and blue bands and then combined to make an RGB color image. And as you can see, there are numerous artifacts, horizontal lines, vertical lines, some smudges at the top left corner that are degrading the image quality. And that's what your project is looking at correcting. Um, But to help with that correction, you may be interested in trying to find images that either overlap with this image or that are next to it and partially overlap with it. And so that's what this tutorial is going to cover. So each THEMIS image comes with an image ID. Since you're looking at viz images, they will always start with a V, and then they'll be ended with 8 digits. Don't worry about what those digits mean. It's just a unique identifier to identify each image. Now, to actually search for the new images, we're going to go to our website. It's jmars.asu.edu. That will bring you to this page, and you need to scroll down slightly to where it says JMARS Public Downloads. And the website will automatically pick next to this JMARS 5 logo. It will automatically detect what operating system you're using and will give you a link for the correct installer. So I'm showing this example on a Windows 10 computer, but it should work very similarly on Mac. So let's click on that download link. It will download the installer. And then once that's downloaded, I'll say open when done, and we'll start the installation progress, which is pretty simple. You see JMARS will tell you that it's getting ready to install. So it may ask for permission to install on your computer. Go ahead and say yes. It will automatically pick what it thinks is a good directory to install itself in. You can usually just hit next. Just leave all these values at the defaults and hit next. Same thing, leave this at the default and hit next. Same thing, hit next. And go ahead and finish. And you see that I'm specifically asking it to create a desktop icon for me so that I can restart it in the future, but it will also begin after it installs by running the actual program. So if it asks you to check for updates, just go ahead and click next. It shouldn't find any, and then click finish. And then you may need to wait a second. Oh, there it is. So JMARS will open a login screen that looks like this. Just go ahead and leave the email address and password areas blank and do continue as guest, unless you want to do more with JMARS and decide you actually want to go down here and create your own account. But for now, the continue as guest will work just fine for us. Now, the JMARS program is basically a GIS, which is a geographic information system. It contains a lot of data about every planet in the solar system, not just Mars. But all that data is correlated with a global position, so latitude, longitude, coordinates, so that when we bring in the data, it all appears in the right place relative to other data. And it can be a little intimidating at first, but JMARS is also designed to be simple enough that new users should be able to do relatively simple things pretty straightforwardly. And that's going to apply to us today. So just to clean up the screen here, I'm going to turn off our nomenclature, which is what is putting the names of all these features on. And I'm going to turn off these layers here. That'll make things run a whole lot faster. Okay, so now to start, we want to first of all find that image that we were looking at before. So remember, the image ID here is V639820027. So we are going to click on this plus button to add a new data layer. Going to go to Browse and go down to Imagery. And then down here, you'll see an option that says New THEMIS Stamps. So we're going to click on that. Okay, now, since we already know our image ID, what we're going to do is we're just going to type it in this top field. And we're going to click OK. So that little light next to this new THEMIS stamp layer has turned green, which means it's done processing. And if you double click on it, you can see the images that it found. And sure enough, here's the image that we were looking for. So I'm going to double click on it, and it will center that image in the center of my screen. Now, this is a polar image very close to the North Pole. And if you've ever seen a rectangle map of the Earth and looked at Greenland, you'll know that things near the poles on a rectangular map get stretched out. And so right now, this is very stretched out to the point of not being helpful for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to reorient our screen. So we're going to go to this top search bar here, and we're going to erase what's there and type 90 north and 0 east, which is the coordinates of the North Pole. We're then going to hit enter. And then we are going to go to View at the top and say Recenter Projection. So you can see now this is going to move our view to be centered right above the North Pole of Mars. In here, you see this elevation map colorized by elevation. This large green high area is the polar ice cap, mostly CO2 ice, but there is some water ice in there. And then surrounding it are these sand dune fields that surround the entire North Pole. And outlined in yellow here is our image. So we're going to zoom in. And to do that, you can go to the zoom option up on the top right, or you can right click and go to zoom and center. And so right now we're at 32. So let's try 127. You see that gets us closer, and that map might turn black and white as we get really close to show us a higher resolution view of the planet. Let's go in one more to 256. Okay, so here is our little stamp showing where our image, that basically the outline of our image. Now, if we want to see our image in JMARS, left click on it to make sure it's yellow, then right click, choose render. And unfortunately, this one, although I thought it was going to work, so there should be an option here next to render that says R2B. Unfortunately, for this particular image, that's not in JMARS, and I will look into why. But if the R2B image isn't there, just choose the ABR, or actually the B pole. Let's try B pole. Okay, so there it is. There's a black and white image of our image that used to be in color. So let's put them side by side, and you can see that here's the sand dunes, here's the sand dunes, here's the really white ice. That's what's right here. And then here is this pinkish tannish area showing the layers in the polar ice caps where a bunch of dust is trapped, which colors the ice kind of a pinkish tan color. So now we have our image that we are looking for. Now, how do we find images that are next to it or overlapping it? So let's go ahead and go back to this plus sign. I'm going to say plus, and then we're going to come back and add another new THEMIS layer. And let's change the color of these so we can tell them apart. Now, this is probably going to be the hardest part. You just have to set a couple of search parameters, but it's pretty straightforward. Under image type, select VIS, because we're only looking for VIS images. Click this button that says Set Lat Long Bounds to View. That will basically tell JMARS to only search in the area that's on our screen. If you don't click that, it will search over the entire planet and will take a long time to complete your request. And for now, let's restrict the time from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. And that's on a 24-hour clock, so it's simply 0, 4, and 10. Now, under here, we're going to go to Add Parameters. And we're going to click on two things. We're going to click on Bands and hit Add. We're going to scroll down, and we're going to click on Summing and hit Add. Now, when both of those are up on the right-hand side as selected parameters, we're going to hit OK. And now we have these added search parameters. Under Summing, we're going to say 2 to 2. And for bands, we're going to say 1 and 4. Now, if you saw the first presentation explaining the THEMIS VIS images, this is basically the parameters that describe these color VIS images we have of the surface. So that's what we're going to be specifically looking for. So now we'll hit OK, and JMARS will go off and search. And you see it comes back to us pretty quickly. Now, it can be a little hard to see these images just because there's so many overlapping rectangles. So what I like to do is go back to this new THEMIS stamp layer that we added, the number 2 one, double click on it, go to Settings, and move this slider up to maybe a quarter of the way. That will fill in with semi-transparent color the images that we found and makes it a little easier to tell them apart. So you can see it found our original image. So we can load that image in this second layer. And then we can also see images that are overlapping it. So this one overlaps about half of it. So if we want to look at it, we right click on it, do render selected THEMIS stamp. And again, if there's an R2B option, choose that. Otherwise, choose B pole. And you can see we have another image there. Let me zoom in a little bit more to 512 so we can see them in more detail. You can see it's the same area, but just extends further. And you can see this image has some more significant horizontal striping in it, and well as some vertical striping along the image, but it's in different locations than that original image. Now, it's sometimes useful to find multiple images that are overlapping an area. Unfortunately, it looks like this is the only image that overlaps our original image, but you can see there's multiple images that overlap this secondary image. So, for example, here, we'll load this one, and you see here, there's a RGB. So not to confuse you, but if there's an RGB, feel free to render that one too. That will show it in color. That's not a great color image, but it is in color. Let's look at some other ones. So if JMARS kind of stops on you, it's probably just thinking for a second. The speed of JMARS will depend on basically how heavily our servers are being used at any given time. Oh, pretend that didn't happen. Okay, so sure enough, it shows that image. Now, so this was our original image. And again, we were looking for images that overlapped it. And this is the only one that fully or partially overlaps it. So say you actually want to go and download this image. So go back and right click on it, or left click to select it, right click, and then do where it says view new THEMIS stamps. It gives you the image ID of the new image you're looking at, and choose web browse. That should pop up your web browser to the THEMIS image page for that image. And then if you scroll down, this is where down here under products, unfortunately, this one doesn't have an R2B. That's the one the color image that you want to work with. I will look into why this doesn't have an R2B, but if you find R2B images that are in here, but that you want an RGB or R2B for, feel free to send me the image ID and I will make sure to get it for you. Sorry that that's apparently not working perfectly. So yeah, so that's instructions for finding adjacent THEMIS images using our JMARS program. And once you know how to do that, you can search for images really in, color viz images really in any location around the entire planet. So if you have any trouble with JMARS or questions about just getting some of those R2B images that aren't showing up in JMARS, feel free to let me know. And thank you and good luck.